There's really nothing else like Mission Impossible. 8 films, over $4.7 billion worldwide, and most of them made its budget back 4 or 5 times over. Now that The Final Reckoning flopped and ended the series on a whimper, let's see how each Mission Impossible film stacks up against its budget. The original Mission Impossible almost never happened. Paramount Pictures spent years trying to adapt the television series, but nothing worked out. Until Tom Cruise founded Cruise Wagner Productions in 1992. He picked Mission Impossible for the first project. Brian De Palma came on to direct. The studio wanted to keep it lean, $50 million budget tops, but Cruise pushed for more scale. He wanted to deliver what he called a big, showy action piece, and the budget crept up to about $80 million. Cruise did most of his own stunts. That famous vault heist, dangling from the ceiling, that's him. The exploding aquarium was also him. De Palma tried the sequence with a stuntman, but it didn't look convincing. So Cruise did it himself, even with the risk of drowning. This was one of the rare blockbusters to finish under budget and on time. Cruise even deferred his standard $20 million fee for a bigger cut of the profits. That actually paid off big. $458 million global gross, third highest for 1996, right behind Independence Day and Twister. The first film really set the tone for what a blockbuster action franchise could be. Cruise later said he wanted to give audiences something they hadn't seen before, a movie he himself would want to see, made possible by the technology of the time. There's this CBS interview from 1996. Someone asked Cruise if this could become a franchise, and he just shrugs it off, says he doesn't want to be redundant. 20 years and 8 movies later, that's a little ironic. John Woo had just directed Face Off, and Cruise was coming off a run of Jerry Maguire, Eyes Wide Shut, and Magnolia. Every studio wanted him. But even though Mission Impossible was a massive hit in 1996, Hollywood wasn't cranking out sequels the way it does now. Cruise was busy and Paramount took its time, but eventually everything came together. This time, the budget jumped to $120 million, which would be over $230 million today. The production dragged on, and the stunts just kept getting riskier. The iconic cliff-free solo scene, that's all Cruise, no stunt double, actually tearing his shoulder on the climb. He shot part of that with a broken foot. Woo later admitted he couldn't even watch the monitor during some of those stunts. And it worked. The sequel opened huge, even set a record for Memorial Day weekend. The movie finished at $549 million globally. It was the top-grossing film of 2000, ahead of Gladiator and Castaway. That year, only 3 movies passed $400 million worldwide, and Mission Impossible 2 led the pack despite mixed reviews. It's actually still the weakest on Rotten Tomatoes. It kept the top box office spot until Gone in 60 Seconds premiered, and held in the top 10 until Scary Movie arrived in July. This one came with less money but a whole lot more controversy. This franchise was always Cruise's baby, and he ran it exactly the way he wanted. Some directors could not get on board, and they paid the price. Development here was a mess, the release date kept slipping, and directors kept walking. David Fincher and Joe Carnahan both signed on and then quit over creative differences. Fincher later said by the third movie, the people financing them are experts on how they should be made. You want to get rid of extraneous opinions. So, delays mounted. That meant a year lost, cost overruns, and some cast changes. By the time J.J. Abrams signed on, Cruise had to cut his salary just to keep the budget under control after all the false starts. Final budget was about $150 million, and box office came in at $398 million worldwide. It made money, but it was the lowest-grossing Mission film. Paramount blamed the underperformance partly on audience fatigue, but mostly on Cruise himself. In 2005, his public image hit a wall, everything from his Oprah couch incident to non-stop tabloid headlines about Scientology. Even the top brass at Viacom got involved. Sumner Redstone, the chairman, did something you almost never see. He cut ties with Cruise after a 14-year run, ended a production deal worth $10 million a year. Redstone publicly said his recent conduct has not been acceptable to Paramount and accused Cruise's antics of costing them up to $150 million in ticket sales. Cruise's team fired back, called the move graceless and undignified. Because of all the controversy, Mission Impossible 3 just never matched the box office of the original or the sequel. For a while, the future of the franchise looked uncertain. Ghost Protocol changed everything for Mission Impossible. After the third one underperformed, the studio brought in Brad Bird, his first live-action film, and doubled down on making this a true event. The budget was $145 million, and every cent is on the screen. This is the first Mission movie shot with IMAX cameras, and you really feel it, especially when Cruise climbs the Burj Khalifa. There are no CGI tricks and no faking. He actually climbs the tallest building in the world with no stunt double. The extra IMAX costs and location shoots pushed the budget, but the investment paid off. The movie opened in December 2011 with a $12 million IMAX-only preview. They even included a 6-minute Dark Knight Rises prologue. Nolan's new movie was, of course, a big deal, and word of mouth took it from there. Ghost Protocol pulled in $209 million domestic, $485 international, and finished at $695 million worldwide, almost 5 times the budget. At the time, that made it the biggest Mission Impossible film and the 5th highest grossing movie of 2011. Nothing could really compete with Harry Potter and Twilight that year, but Ghost Protocol still set a franchise record. Cruise also personally toured the world to promote the film, spent hours meeting fans in the Middle East and India. On one premiere night, he spent 3 hours shaking hands. Some say he does it for promotion. And sure, it helps, but the consensus is Cruise genuinely loves it. He loves making these movies, and he loves meeting people who watch them. This is where Christopher McQuarrie comes in for good. His partnership with Cruise starts here, and it's become legendary for a reason. McQuarrie already won an Oscar for The Usual Suspects. But his first film as director, The Way of the Gun, bombed and basically put him in director's jail for 12 years. Cruise brought him back with Jack Reacher, brought him on set to rewrite Edge of Tomorrow and to help with Ghost Protocol. Finally, Cruise hands him the keys for Rogue Nation, the 5th mission and the biggest film of McQuarrie's career at that point. McQuarrie later said, "I'm here because this guy banked me when no one else would." Rogue Nation kept the franchise on an upswing. $150 million budget, $689 million worldwide, another huge win. This time, Cruise strapped himself to the outside of a military Airbus cargo plane as it took off. Again, no CGI and no stand-in. He did it 8 times to get the shot. Rogue Nation's numbers ended up just a little below Ghost Protocol's, but it launched in the crowded summer of 2015 and still pulled in $195 million domestic. The series had found a groove, big stunts, big global numbers, consistent budgets around $150 million, and returns at 4 to 5 times that. McQuarrie summed it up like this: "This movie makes the case for why Tom Cruise should keep doing this as long as his knees and nerves hold up." Fallout changed the game again. First time in the franchise that a director, McQuarrie, comes back for a second film, and it paid off. The budget climbed to $178 million. But Fallout set new records across the board, including for Mission's opening weekend. This is the movie everyone associates with 2 things. First, Cruise breaking his ankle during a rooftop jump in London and actually finishing the take with a broken ankle. Production stopped for 8 weeks while Cruise healed. Insurance covered some of the delay, but the total cost reportedly pushed the budget up to $250 million, after you count lost time in schedule reshuffles. The story about Cruise's injury became part of the film's marketing. That shot even stayed in the finished movie. The second thing was Henry Cavill's mustache, which he grew out for Fallout. When he went back to reshoot scenes for Justice League, Warner Brothers had to use CGI to erase the mustache. They did the job so badly, Mustache Superman is a meme now, probably cost Warner a couple of millions too. Fallout opened in July 2018 with $61.5 million, the best start in franchise history, and kept going. It hit $220 million domestic, $791 worldwide, biggest Mission Impossible movie to date. The critical reception was the best the series ever had, 97% on Rotten Tomatoes. Variety figured the movie needed about $700 million to turn a profit. It cleared that comfortably. When you look at Dead Reckoning Part 1, the movie itself is huge, but the real story is everything it took just to finish it. Production kicked off right as the world shut down in 2020. The crew made it to Venice ready to start, and then Italy was hit by COVID. The entire shoot shut down. After months, they tried again, only for positive COVID tests to pause everything all over again. It went on like this, stop and start, through the rest of 2020. Every new protocol cost more money. The crew ended up quarantined on cruise ships in Norway. Just keeping the set running was burning through tens of millions. By the time the film wrapped, the budget had soared to over $290 million. That made it the most expensive Mission Impossible ever. The original plan was to film both parts of Dead Reckoning back to back, but the pandemic killed that idea. They could only finish Part 1. Tom Cruise was relentless about finishing. When the London shoot hit trouble, that's when his infamous audio blew up online, Cruise just going off on crew who broke distancing rules. "I'm on the phone with every studio at night, insurance companies, producers, and they're looking at us. We want the gold standard. They're back there in Hollywood making movies right now because of us." Nobody actually blamed him for that rant, though. One crew member even said Cruise took on a huge burden so we could keep making this film. Finally, 3 years later, in July 2023, Dead Reckoning Part 1 hit theaters. It got positive reviews and started out strong, but then came a wave nobody saw coming. Barbie and Oppenheimer released just a week later and took over every premium screen. Barbenheimer just wiped the floor with Dead Reckoning. It finished with $567 million worldwide. On paper, that's decent, but with a nearly $300 million budget, it flopped. With marketing, it probably needed $800 to $900 million just to break even. I'm sure we all wanted this franchise to end on a big high, but honestly, it never really looked likely. First, there was the COVID fallout. Then, right on top of that, the actors and writers' strikes in 2023 shut everything down. Every day of those delays meant another million or two poured into the budget. By the summer of 2025, the total cost had reached nearly $400 million. That puts The Final Reckoning up there with the most expensive movies in history. From the business side, the math just stopped making sense. Studio analysts said the movie would need something in the $800 million to $1 billion range just to break even. In reality, the box office finished at around $600 million worldwide. A modest increase over Part 1, but nowhere close to what it needed to cover the costs. To make matters worse, premium screens, IMAX and similar, were mostly booked for competing blockbusters. And so The Final Reckoning never got the big format boost that Mission Impossible movies usually enjoy. Financially, this outcome means The Final Reckoning lands in the record books as an over-budget bet that didn't pan out. It made solid money, but not nearly enough to justify the price tag. Still, Tom Cruise was in good spirits at the premiere. He's 62 now, and he said, "I wouldn't change a thing. I did the best you can, and every film, it's all the efforts of everyone at that moment. You can't really argue with that."